So welcome to the first episode of LUMS Candid Leaders. So we have our first lovely guest, named Shanza Khan.
Thanks.
She is a present entrepreneur and the former consultant for Asian Development Bank as well as World Bank. She's a Harvard graduate and also a former director of Harvard Club Pakistan Lahore chapter and also the former president of guys, it's a long list of accomplishments. So, former president of Pakistani Association of Harvard Alumni, Women Alumni.
Yes.
Yeah. So many accomplishments, ma'am. So how are you feeling today?
I'm excited to be here. This is a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to interacting with the class.
Yeah. So let's start. What's a typical day it looks like in your life?
So my day starts first at 6:30 because I have to get my kids ready for school. And then my office is walking distance from my home. So I'm there in 5 minutes. There at 9, pretty much. I like being the first one in the office and then making everybody else who walks in late feel bad that the boss is already there. I normally have make sure my emails and everything are taken care of. I schedule my first meetings from 10 o'clock. Usually my typical day has a workshop or a talking session. Currently we're having, we've partnered with Times Higher Education. Some of you may have heard of it. It's an international organization which ranks university globally. So we are partnering on the student festivals with them. So I was a speaker for the US and then UK, and we have Canada coming up on Wednesday. So usually there's either talk and so on, and there are continuous calls from parents and students. It's the week of ED. So lots of last minutes and late submissions.
Early decisions.
And my day is always back to back. I don't tune out at all.
So to be an entrepreneur, you always have to be on foot. Would you say that?
My computer is always with me. I don't like wasting a single minute. Even if I'm in the car, the computer goes. And I don't think that has really to do just with entrepreneurship. That's the way I was wired. I was always like this. One of my first jobs as a junior professional associate at the World Bank in DC, I wanted to actually show my boss that I was the last one out of the office. So I would be there till 8:30 or 9, and I was also the first one in. So I wanted to be recognized.
Recognized, yeah. So so during your life, what's the biggest risk that you have taken up till now?
Career change.
Career change from consultancy to being an entrepreneur.
So it wasn't just a consultant. I was actually a full-time employee with the World Bank, and then afterwards with ADB, and then I actually started consulting. But moving from a very well-paying, lucrative job to launching my own startup was a risk because you were kind of taking a chance on a steady income.
Yeah.
And seeing whether this venture is going to float or not.
And so entrepreneurship is all about taking risks.
Yes, it is about taking risk.
So it's just कि एक अंदर से feeling होती है कि like I have to do something on my own and I have to recognize myself, do something for the society as well.
Partly, I think one in the field that I was in, so economic development, for those of you, and I know quite a few students in LUMS do economics, so some of you out there might relate with me. If you are planning a career in international development or working with the government, I can tell you that after a certain while, a few amount of years after, you kind of are, the business class tickets are making you feel happy and conferences and all of that, and you kind of start reflecting on what you're actually achieving, you notice that the policy briefs that you're writing, the advice that you're giving, and the recommendations are all secondary to the larger political hoo-ha going in the background. So and I'm not going to name international institutions, if that certain international institution wishes to give the country a loan, regardless of the advice or whatever is coming from either within the team or external consultants, they want to give the country the loan. So you kind of have that moment of reflection that what am I actually doing with my life. I have a good job, I'm making good money, but am what I, is what I'm doing useful? And I felt, no, I didn't think what I was doing was useful, despite having worked at the highest levels.
So it's like find your calling thing.
I had to find my calling.
Yeah. So as Rumi states, what you seek is seeking you. So like, how does it feel to be a woman breaking the ceiling in the corporate sector, as well as like becoming an entrepreneur, especially in the Pakistani society, जहाँ पर अभी भी entrepreneurship पे people are like hesitant towards moving towards entrepreneurship, and being a woman in Pakistan and being an entrepreneur, और वो भी corporate world के भी there's glass ceiling exists. So what do you think about that? You have accomplished all that. You have defeated all that.
The interesting part was when I first launched my startup, I was sitting in a co-sharing space called Collabs. And I was the oldest one there. I felt like a fossil. There were all these young 20-somethings roaming around and doing cutting-edge entrepreneurship work. And I was like, do I belong here? It's kind of too late in the day for me. But what I was really happy to see is that they didn't actually view me that way. They were quite welcoming the 6 months I was based there. And I would say half, if not more, were women. And so I think there is almost a myth there that entrepreneurship is not a field for women. Our firm, Ion Ivy, is currently selected by Catalyst Labs in Karachi, which is an incubator firm, and it also gives mentoring advice for startups and so on, really going out of their way to promote women entrepreneurship. So, for someone, I had a big background in economics, but I had never run my own company. I didn't know all the different elements. One of my biggest problems has been HR, hiring the right people. And you would think in a country like Pakistan with so much unemployment, that would be easy, right? So, naive as I was, my first advertisements were on Jobby and all these free platforms, right? And I got thousands of CVs, none of which who had bothered to read the job description of what I was actually looking for. So, for women, I actually think that's a almost misnomer, Haider. I actually think there is a lot of opportunity for women in Pakistan. The glass ceiling exists. That's still on getting on boards of, different companies and organizations. I think that as long as you're willing to speak out and kind of pivot yourself in the right direction, frankly, making use of my alumni network of both Harvard and Emory has really helped me out. So, use your networks. LUMS has a very rich alumni network. So you should kind of really tap into that.
Guys, networking, I would also say about networking, because I really stress on the fact of networking, because you get things done with your network more easily than your other things, because it won't matter what you know, it will always matter who you know.
That is true to a large extent. That is true to a large extent, particularly in Pakistan. Not just here. I would even say if you are trying to get, that promotion or go to a certain division, it does boil down to the fact, did that person know you face to face? And this is I find a key mistake that undergraduates or graduates make when they're looking for a job. There are a lot of these, you put up your CV in data banks, you send out emails, and then you're like, but I didn't hear back. And that's because you actually did not put yourself out there by showing up, taking an appointment and showing up and saying, demanding that attention. So you have to be a little aggressive. And this is something we need to change, because in school, we're kind of taught not to be heard.
Yeah.
And almost taught to be invisible. And then you learn that you have to unlearn these habits when you're in college, and you have to put yourself out there.
So, ma'am, whose career inspires you and why?
Whose career inspires me? It's Bill Gates.
Bill Gates.
Yeah.
His daughter just got recently married.
To a Muslim Egyptian.
To a Muslim Egyptian, yeah. So let's talk about Harvard, the iviest of the Ivies. So, do you have to miss out the fun part to get into Harvard, and also to be a student at Harvard? Do you have to miss out in the fun? Because Is it that competitive?
So, okay, here I have gone to a community college in the US. I was there for a year in South Dakota, in the smallest population that can exist out there, 13,000. I think we have more people in Kent than that. I've been to Emory, which is, a top 20
private
institution in the US. And then, of course, it's Harvard. And I can tell you that we have these myths in our head that there is nothing better than an Ivy education. And let me tell you something. This is, not that I'm trying to shoot myself on the foot with this, because the H-bomb works wonders in Pakistan. It does. It will open doors for you. People look at you with awe in their eyes. You went to Harvard? How did that happen? And, I feel like such a hypocrite because I know people who are brighter than me, who are more intelligent than I am, who did not go there. And it's, as far as the workload is concerned, here's another kind of, since you guys are all in undergrad and are probably thinking about your master's or will at some point, it's easier to get into any of the Ivies or brand names for your master's versus the undergrad. So if you want that thappa, you're in a good position. Frankly, you will be known by the last degree you carry. Nobody cares that I graduated summa cum laude from Emory. Many in Pakistan haven't even heard Emory, they will just recognize you by the last institution you attended. So brand names in that sense matter. Whether the education itself was different, not substantially. Not substantially. You had all the greats there. So, all the names were there.
Yeah. ये वाला ना आगे सवाल आना था.
Sorry.
But कोई नहीं. It's called improvisation. So like if you were given the chance to return to Harvard, but as an undergrad, would you do it, and would you choose it over Emory?
I would.
So you would.
I would.
The H-bomb, guys. It works.
and I'll tell you why. I think once again it goes back to what was inculcated in us when we were children. It's so difficult to kind of remove yourself from it, even knowing all of these things. Why? Because in the 1990s, I watched a movie called With Honors. I don't know if any one of you has heard of it. But that is what introduced, and I was in Convent of Jesus and Mary. I was 15 years old. I saw this movie and I was like, that's where I want to go.
The Harvard.
That's it. This is, for me, was the epitome of what an American education at the best institute would look like. It was so sophisticated. Then I started reading Eric Siegel, and I read Love Story, I read Doctors, I read Acts of Faith, and that sealed it. I was like, okay, this is where I want to go. How do I get there?
Bleeding crimson.
Yes.
You have to bleed crimson.
But in terms of the education itself, there's not too much of a difference, guys. So no matter where you land up, it is what you make of yourself. It is what opportunities you tap into, whether you're at Kinza College, and I was at Kinza for 3 months, or you're somewhere else.
So like the next question obviously is like, how would you compare your Emory experience to your Harvard experience?
I actually found my professors at Emory to have more of a lasting impact on my career than the ones from Harvard. Even though the ones at Harvard, so I had a class with Larry Summers. I specifically went and signed up. It was a class on globalization because I was like, oh, be taught by Larry Summers. I mean, who's going to get that opportunity? But there was a Latin American economics teacher at Emory, and I took first intro to macro with her, and I was like, oh, I love the way she teaches. And so then I purposely took intermediate macro with her, and we established a really good relationship. She ended up being my dissertation advisor, and I was telling Haider prior to this conversation, I was, looking for jobs and interviewing with Coke and McKinsey. And then the dot-com bubble broke in 2011 and all the offers went away. And I went to my professor with whom I now had this great relationship. And she was going to the Federal Reserve Bank. And I was like, take me with you. And she did. So I ended up going to the Fed. And the impact she had on my career, and as well as if you're having a liberal arts education, I was forced to take intro to music and then opera. And those classes with those professors, I feel, have defined me and broadened my views more than the class with Larry Summers, which is great to talk about, and but I don't think I particularly learned anything that I couldn't having even seen YouTube videos.
Yeah. That's perfectly understandable. Like LUMS में भी होता है.
LUMS में कौन से इस तरह के brand names हैं?
इसको कट देना यार. I have 2 more years to go. So like
I'll ask you senior year.
Yeah. So now let's talk about entrepreneurship. Like, what was the like you have talked about, Kena, it's about getting yourself useful, like having do something very, very useful for the community as well, like forming behind IO and IB. But there are like other entrepreneurship ventures, but like they are not like social enterprise us tarah karke nahi hote. Still, like, what do you feel is the like motivation behind becoming an entrepreneur?
So, Haider, I think it really touches upon having meaning in your daily life. I mean, for me as a workaholic, and I'm an OCD personality. I want to have a reason to wake up in the morning and keep going till night. I mean, I have 3 kids. My family is an integral part of who I am, but so is my work. Oh. And I wanted to do something which also wanted to prove to myself, how big can I take this? And so kind of what started off as a boutique counseling firm, the challenge is always, how do you differentiate yourself? And that's what we've really had fun with, going into different elements which no other consulting firm in Pakistan currently has.
Like finding out what your specialty and like what your...
Yeah,
like
how do I make myself different? And
yeah,
in that journey, I mean, literally stumbling across certain things which were not part of the original plan. So for instance, we have become the one-stop shop for international competitions from grade 2 to grade 12, whether it is science, whether it is math, that any student, regardless of which school you're going to, can now access. Currently there was Kangaroo and there's Hippo. If you have younger siblings, you would have heard about it. But the school has to be registered. And that automatically means bureaucracy and red tape. Unless the school permits you to participate, or unless the school itself is registered, Convent, as much as I love Convent, never was, and I went to talk about them about signing up, and they're still not interested, prevents certain students from accessing these opportunities. So access was a big issue for me. And so cut the red tape and allow students to choose. What do they actually want to do? If they're into the sciences, go for it. If they're into photography, go for that. If you're into public speaking, that's the way to roll.
So ma'am, you talked about bureaucracy, like the label of the schools, right? So in college admissions, as well as in grad schools, how much role does the bureaucracy play? Like, for example, the high school that you went or the undergrad college where you went, it does play a role.
It does play a role in you guys would have gone through the same. Your counselor recommendation plays a key part. If your counselor has a grudge against you, and I have students who come to me with this problem that, we don't get opportunities to be part of our clubs and societies because the management doesn't think that we're able to execute that. So in fact, our role is to identify opportunities for them nationally and internationally outside of the school. It's exactly to overcome these particular barriers. But yes, and so part of it is, the counselor reports. The other part is the advice. And I find so much misinformation being given in schools about how the process works, when should you even start the process. In high school, it really should start in grade 9.
Grade 9, yeah.
I was cribbing about how students wake up in A2, far too late to do, or even A1 to do anything about it. So, for me, I was able to go, and my kids can only go on a full scholarship. That's another kind of driving force behind ION Ivy. that you need to identify that full ride. As a
Yeah.
Pakistani, unless you're landed or an industrialist, you guys can close your ears if any of you are here. You really need that full ride in
Yeah.
order to make it to university. So how do you identify those opportunities? And high schools, as some of you may have gone through this process, teachers only identify one or two students. That's who you can nominate for the University of Toronto Pearson Scholarship or UBC. What about everybody else in that classroom? I was never the head girl. I was not even any prefect of any house in convent. I mean, I had no hope. So how, what about the rest of us, in the middle tier or towards the end? What do we do and how should we go about it? And so I think what's so liberating about the internet is that now you can actually do this homework
On your
own without relying on a counselor.
Yeah, it's always better to have your stuff pre-planned and research about it. Then there is a lesser chance that you will be misguided.
Absolutely. So I mean, for another thing is, I think there's a lot of influence of the UK on our system, clearly, colonial history and all. And so one key element that I found that was different was in the UK and Pakistan, we have this kind of tendency, we want to finish our education. Bachelor's karo, master's karo, MPhil karo, PhD karo, agar wo karna hai, or shadi kar lo, depending on how that trajectory is going. But get your education out of the way. And now this trend has increasingly changed. In some cases, depending on what you want to major in, it's actually compulsory for you to have work experience before you can even apply. In fact, the more years you have under your belt, the more competitive you're going to be applying to that master's or graduate institution.
That's perfectly understandable. So guys, tayari kar lena. Acha guys, so what is the best part of helping students get into their dream university?
I'm assuming you're talking about masters, right?
Anything, the whole experience of INIV, you're helping them get into their dream schools.
Yeah.
How does it feel? What's the best part of it?
Oh, the best part of it is the phone call.
I got in.
It's as the results come in. In fact, and once again, you talk about having meaning to the job you're doing. I have had parents calling me, crying about how they could not have sent their child to an institution without this particular scholarship. And so, this is what we continuously work to do. We're not looking at just the rankings of a university. Where can this kid go on a full ride? If that means going to an institution ranked 40th for economics in Hong Kong, so be it. And that's something you actually have to educate parents for, because they're like, but I haven't heard of this university in Hong Kong. Yeah. And so there is that parental education which goes into it. But that's the most gratifying part of this job, is seeing students place and then send their pictures from wherever they are.
Yeah. You were recently awarded the Governors Award. So how does it feel? So how does it feel to have accomplished so much in such a short time?
It's surreal. I actually don't feel I've accomplished much. I really don't think so, because I feel I have so much more to learn, and the journey ahead is going to be harder. And so for me, it's, I want to go really national properly. And then we're already paving the way for an international global audience. So that's where I want to take Ion Ivy. So I think it's always good to have high targets, because then the journey keeps on continuing. If you kind of pahunch gaye, ho gaya hai, then to bore ho jate hain.
So you have to set the new goals.
Yes,
so,
yes.
It's always moving forward. So being proactive is it's a trait of a good leader, you would say.
I think being ambitious. There are two things. One, being ambitious, and two, being persistent. When right in the early period of Ion Ivy, COVID hit. And we, in fact, had a talk scheduled at LUMS. We had a talk scheduled at Kinnaid LUMS में हमने बड़ी मुश्किलों से सारा setup किया था, and everything dried up. And we were like, oh my, it's like, all this investment, it's going to go down the tube. And then we kind of really looked for ways to harness COVID to our advantage. And we were successful doing that by tapping into the very fact that, okay, let's become edtech. Let's go towards all those technological platforms. Even now, once again, I'm really old. So the tech stuff doesn't come to me easily, which is why we partnered with a former LUMS organization called Nearpeer. And we are now doing our counseling sessions with them. And, really seeing how we can kind of benefit from each other.
Okay. So would you like to tell any interesting stories and fun interesting stories about your college life and your grad life at Emory and Harvard, obviously? So what's the fun part looks like?
So I wasn't a fun person. I was a very boring person in college. Because you guys have to understand where I'm coming from. I was a very shy student at Convent of Jesus and Mary who had never attended a co-ed institution. When I landed up over there, I had been fed all of these stories about how the West is out to get you and how, the boys are just, you need to stay away from them, just stay clear. So when we were put into even group assignments, my parents would call me every night at 11 p.m. It was set. I had to be in my dorm room and I had to pick up the phone. And so I think a lot of liberties, I have regrets, a lot of liberties that I perhaps could have taken. I did not.
Agla question yahi tha.
So Emory is known for their mascot called Dooley. It's a skeleton. And no one still knows who Dooley ends up being, but Dooley would not often, but sometimes appear in class. And Dooley had the magic, and no matter what was going on, an exam, a session, they could just dismiss the class. So, saal mein ek dafa Dooley's ball hota tha.
Acha.
I never attended it. It is my biggest regret in the fear that I would be doing something wrong. I did not attend, the ball that the school is known for, which was a mask kind of Halloween ball. But, wohi like acha bacha banne ke usme, I feel I missed out on some stuff.
So my next question was things you regret not doing as an undergraduate during your college life and obviously your grad life.
So grad life was different for me, and I think for the women out there, this is my advice to you. So I had planned to, and I got admission into Harvard 2 years after my undergrad. But meri shaadi bhi ho gayi. And ek saal baad bachchi bhi ho gayi. And mere miyan ko visa nahi mila. So I ended up deferring for 3 years. The third year, Harvard told me, if you don't come, we're taking away your scholarship and admission. So I took my 8-month-old daughter with me to Harvard. And in order to get my husband there, because he wasn't getting any visa, I applied for, and he got admitted into a PhD program at BU. So he joined me 6 months after. And both of us, so I guess it applies to the men in this room as well, both of us scheduled our classes that one of us was with our kid and the other one was in the classroom. So I ended up taking some weird courses like environmental justice at Harvard that I would never have taken otherwise because that was the only one fitting into my schedule. And so make sure the timing works for you. It was great, and no, I'm lying. It was not great doing my master's with a kid and husband. You probably want to do this while you're single.
Get engaged, maybe. But don't get married.
And likewise, I think for my husband, it was very stressful when he had to give his comps for Boston University. In fact, that was the first time because we decided we would never put our kid in daycare. hum khud karenge, like good, proper Pakistanis, and we would never do this to our child. And come comp time, I think he was just losing the plot. And so that's where we called the grandparents to intervene. And the Nana came over and he took Serene with him, and she was with my parents in Dubai for a month. And then she went over to her Dada Dadis for another month till he managed to get his examinations out of the way, because otherwise it would have really so really, you should tap into your parental and in the future in your in-law network as well. You never know when they will come in handy.
Network, guys.
Network, always.
So, any experience in life that pulled you down, but you made your way through it?
I think right after my work at the Fed, I had been waiting for a call. I was hoping to get a call from the World Bank. I had applied for the junior professional associate. I figured I was a good candidate, graduated at 19, summa cum laude for memory, sare credentials to hain. Why wasn't I getting a call? The call did not come. And so after being in the US for 5 years, I came back to Pakistan to job hunt. And I interviewed with Faisal Bank, I interviewed with some other places. They looked down their noses at me. And it wasn't really going well. And in the meantime, I started doing volunteer work because I never like having gaps on my CV. I would advise you to not do that. The call came after 6 months.
It did come.
It did eventually come. They actually asked me to come into their Islamabad office. I then had I had packed up. I had moved back. I wasn't expecting the call anymore, but it eventually came. But I think those 6 months was, when I was thinking, I'm always in the grind. I have proved myself. I have a perfect GPA. What more is life asking of me, and why isn't this happening? And people are still, looking down their noses at me when I'm going to these banks. What more do they want? And because a lot of the interviews weren't materializing. And, that's when you start questioning yourself. Okay, itni padhai ki hai, internships bhi hain, work experience bhi hai. What more? So I think, when you get to that part and you're not getting those offers that you think that maybe your credentials require, you do kind of question yourself, you feel down. I think there is no other way to put it. You do feel down, why isn't it happening for me?
So being this much proactive in life obviously comes at some opportunity cost, right? So what are those?
Less time with my kids.
Yeah.
No, my husband is in Islamabad. He's working there. We're both workaholics. So we have always kind of helped each other in our career, or understood when one of us has to be in a different place than where we are. But I think insufficient. I particularly did not enjoy my daughter growing up because it was always, you are turning in the next assignment. You want to make sure that your grades are not slacking. And as a woman, you're coming home and cooking and cleaning, which I wasn't cleaning really. So the apartment was always a mess. But it's this feeling that you always have to be a superwoman, because at the end of the day, not only career is considered your perk as a woman in Pakistan. And despite having, the most understanding husband in this, घर पे खाना आपने ही बनाना है and सफाई भी आपने ही करनी है. So and बच्चे at the end of the day भी आपने संभालने हैं. So it's, I think for the women out there, if you are serious about your career, no kid's going to come at the expense of yourself. And unless this is something you really enjoy doing, it's very challenging. I have friends who are often, very depressed because they have had to either compromise on their family, usually on their career.
So like you have worked in the World Bank as well as in the Asian Development Bank. So what are the pros of working at such a big giant? Like you have worked in two, obviously, and many more, FedEx and so many more. FedEx, Federal Reserve. Yeah. So like, what are the pros of working at such a big giant? But obviously there will be some cons. Like.
So, I mean, people often ask me when they hear, okay, I've worked at the World Bank or ADB, hey, do you know so and so? And I would say 90% of the time I'm like, no, because the organizations are so big. There are 8,000 people in the DC office. Even if people assume you know all the Pakistanis, you don't. You really kind of know the department that you're in. So, and I feel making those, once again, relationships with your team are so important. By the way, afterwards, when I stopped being an employee and I was doing consulting, it was these very people who helped me give my first consulting assignments. So I can't emphasize this enough, that wherever you are, and I don't mean this in the cold-blooded way of go out there and dosti karo, network karo, and this and that, but I do mean in the sense of opening yourself up to establish long-term relationships. Now, in the West, this often takes the form of retreat ho rahi hai. Weekend getaway company kar raha hai. Understand कि Pakistan में भी ये more and more हो रहा है. I realized from missing out on my undergrad, and I don't have a solid network from Emory today, because I had some ways isolated myself from this in the fear of the West is so, I grew out of it eventually, but I lost a few years in that. So do form those relationships. You will bump into those people over and over again. This network that you have here, the people sitting in this room, and the people you are going to the cafeteria with, somewhere down the line, you can, not use them in a bad way, but they can be a very good resource for you in opening up doors. And, I would say one of the biggest assets of Harvard is the alumni network and community. I mean, it is remarkable on how, no matter who I want to tap wherever in the world, I just was in a trip in Greece. If I put on my Facebook, hey, who's there? Somebody pops up inevitably. And another advantage, I would say, of branded names. Inevitably, you will find people in the government, the State Department, in important institutions, at higher tier of corporations. So when you want to get work done, and I can tell you, one of the hardest things of being an entrepreneur in Pakistan is the paperwork of a startup, in learning how to register your company, in learning how to register your logo, and trying to get stuff, file your taxes. These are so difficult to do. One of this, and I still haven't figured this out, and I'm actually planning to tap into Raza Bakar, who's a Harvard grad, can help me with this. We have international partners. It is impossible, so the bank tells me, to send remittances the other way out, to send, dollars from Pakistan. It's great to get in. It's very easy to get remittances in, but it's very difficult to send money out of Pakistan. And so this is where those networks and connections come in, just even to help you answer questions. How do I make this happen? Because oftentimes the guy behind the phone, and believe me, I've spent a lot of time with the guy behind the phone, is not very helpful. So it's not कि आप किसी को इस्तेमाल करें, it's just sometimes to get information. Okay, how do I make this happen? And then, of course, you should pay it forward. So, and another thing I would really, just recommend to all of you, and sometimes I feel that the people who've been the most helpful in my career have been the foreigners. And unfortunately, it's true. When I have approached Pakistanis within my department from the World Bank, they have not been half as helpful. And this is, a humble request to everyone who's tuning in today. I don't know why we need to have this cutthroat policy of, or feel threatened if another Pakistani is doing well. it gives me immense pride to see, as I mentioned, collabs. I was happy to see Pakistanis doing well. I think we should always kind of give, put a hand out and say, hey, and I have people asking me all the time, where can I get a job or something? And I'm happy to connect them to my network. And sometimes things work out. That's all I can do now. But at least I feel good. Ke, acha, kuch to kiya.
The H-bomb, guys. It works. So let's...
You're running out of time, Haider. No.
So let's move towards the rapid fire round.
Oh my.
So what comes to your mind when I say the following? Success.
Me.
Obviously, you are of the first guest of Candid Leaders. So, inspiration.
Benazir.
Nice. Harvard has a scholarship based on her name.
It does. So there is now even a scholarship at the undergrad level as well as a fellowship at the Kennedy School for her. And I know many people, in fact, there was a period of my life when I was very antagonistic towards her. But looking back and the more I read about her, she's inspirational in many ways.
So, eye on Ivy.
Long way to go.
Glass ceiling.
Huh?
Glass ceiling.
Glass ceiling, break it.
Nice. Regrets.
College dually.
Fun.
Beach, traveling.
Being an entrepreneur.
Show that you're successful.
Being a consultant.
Yeah, I mean, be the best.
Nightmare.
Nightmare. I have this recurring nightmare of my teeth breaking out. I don't know why. I've had it since I was a child. If I know a person who can interpret dreams, I would ask them why I have this.
I would also like to know about this. Adventure.
Thailand. I love going on, I've done snorkeling, I've done paragliding, love adventure.
Okay, so home.
Home, kids. Netflix.
Netflix and kids.
Yes.
So, Candid Leaders.
Candid leaders. We need more of them. I find a lot of hypocrisy amongst people
Talking about
themselves.
Yeah.
I'm being diplomatic.
I understand the point. That's the whole concept of having leaders come here and have like a proper candid discussion.
Okay, so I'll elaborate on this point then. When I came back to Pakistan 3 years ago, I was in Washington before this. So the first thing in my usual way of doing things, let's tap into our networks and see, who I can meet and what's going on. I've been out of Pakistan for so long. And so I joined the Harvard Club of Pakistan first as a member. And then I ran for the director of the Lahore chapter and became one. And I found the politics of it, and by the way, politics is everywhere, of the club, really of a high school level. And so I hung up my hat, even of being the president of the Alumni Society for Women. By the way, women में इतनी politics बिल्कुल नहीं थी जो the combined club has it, because it's kind of dominated by old bureaucrats, kind of like the old boys club. And I believe that's how it works with the HSN alumni vagara as well, who are very much threatened by somebody coming in and doing stuff, ke ab ye karte hain. And part of why we kind of came on the map was we were doing so many events and people found it threatening. And so you will be targeted, you will be, called out. And so you have a choice. You can either shut up and be silent, which is what some of my predecessors, women in these clubs did. I actually took it all the way back to Cambridge. So I called them out on, hey, this is what is going on here. Because, you have to speak out against, or you're going to get you're going to get walked over. Sorry, this kind of digressed from the rapid fire. Go ahead, Haider.
So you have to choose one of the following. Harvard or Emory?
Emory.
the H bomb fails. So, job for a multinational or being an entrepreneur?
Entrepreneur. But that's what I am currently. I think timing is everything. And I think I'm a better entrepreneur having had
the job experience.
If you haven't actually rotated amongst the different departments, I don't think I would have been or I will be as successful without that background. So timing.
Early bird or night owl?
Night owl.
I like it. So work at office or work from home?
Work from home.
Yaar ya karobar?
Can I think about that one? I had a love marriage. I'll take yaar.
So hard work or smart work?
Smart work.
Now this last one, इस पे तो जंगे भी हो चुकी हैं. बिरयानी with आलू या without आलू?
With आलू.
Without आलू यार.
Sindhi biryani.
Sindhi biryani.
Yeah, Bombay biryani.
So like.
You Punjabis.
इतने भी बुरे नहीं है. So like so. The last question is like, if time travel was possible and you could go back in time, so what advice would you give to 20 years old yourself? So we have 20 years old sitting right in front of you, so that's why.
20 years old. So I followed the profession my father wanted me to do. I became an economist like he was. I was not aware of all the career paths I could have taken. If I could redo now what I could then, I would be more aware of all the opportunities that were there. I would have liked going into the foreign service. And so my advice to you guys would have been, oftentimes we don't know what all the possibilities are out there, and we haven't explored. So I think, the career fairs that are there, mere dimag mein tha. And now actually when I look back at it, and I had interviewed with Coke and McKinsey, I feel that if I had actually gone down that path, I would be miserable, because I know people now at McKinsey and Coke and what kind of lifestyles they have and what kind of grind that they need to put in. These are kind of short-term paths where you make a lot of money. You're kind of like, a blazing star, but then you reduce to ashes after 8 years of putting your youth, and you have kind of nothing when you look back on, because you're working these crazy, crazy hours. And so I'm glad I didn't do that, but that was just by chance, because I only knew the brand names. McKinsey ka suna hua tha, and Coke ka suna hua tha, and Atlanta mein to Coke hi hai, because that's where they're based out of. So the America, in fact, campus is all Coke sponsored. So really kind of explore the possibilities, and that's why work experience is even more essential. So when you go out and you kind of internships, kind of give you a flavor. Use this time wisely, your freshman, sophomore, and junior summers, of getting, if you're not sure of what you want to do, if you're thinking journalism, go out and work in the papers. If you're thinking, economics, you have people sitting here from SERP and ideas. Go to your professors, tell them to give you that opportunity, and tell me that after doing 3 months of Stata, you still like it or not. And that is something that you can see yourself doing day in and day out for a long period of your life. And I know people do this because the brand is so good. SERP is good. Ideas is good. Dr. Faisal Bari is excellent. So is Dr. Ali Chima. But how, would you be happy doing that?
Find your calling, guys.
Find your calling.
So before concluding the first episode of Candid Leaders, I would like you to sign a mug for me.
My writing is terrible.
It's just a signature.
Okay.
Can I have the mug?
I thought we were going to have questions from the audience, Haider, but you've just hogged the floor.
We will. I came here to rule.
You came here to rule.
Yeah, man.
Thank you. So, I don't think you'll be able to make anything of my chicken straw.
So like